Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and today I'm going to be making another one of these tier lists where I rank every single matchup in the game. The last one of these that I did was all the way back in August, and I definitely meant to get one of these out before now. This will be the last one before Darkmoor. I thought it would have dropped yesterday actually, but it didn't. Of course, I was still going to upload this today, just as sort of a point in time, or a glimpse of a point in time. But it is looking like, since today's Veterans Day, happy Veterans Day to everybody, to all my American viewers, rather. And it's likely that the update drops tomorrow, so this will likely be the last video that I drop before the update does. So, yep, this will be just sort of one last look at the level 170 meta. And so, a good bit has changed, I think. So, this is the last video that I made, so some of these are going to shift, but we will just have to see what does. So for right now, balance versus death. This is one that has long been very easy for the balance to win. But I did actually make this literal days, by the way, before the Chameleon Clash nerf and the Scion of Balance nerf. So this, I do believe, it still favors the balance, but the death definitely has a solid shot at victory now, because if the Aura War drags on for too long, then the death just sort of wins outright. Balance used to be able to do that, and Balance used to be able to put up pressure against deaths when they had negative auras on with Chameleon, but no longer, and I think that Balance retains control of this matchup. They'll probably win, like, I don't know, 57 out of every 100 games or something like that. It feels oddly specific, but it is definitely closer than it used to be. Death has a much stronger pathway to victory now. It is not nearly as safe as it used to be. Next up, balance versus fire. On the last one, I had this one leaning toward the fire, and given Scion got completely reworked, Balance Scion, of course, got completely reworked, I think I could put this in likely for the fire. I think it's been in this tier before, if I'm not wrong. But yeah, overall, this is not a great matchup for the balance. Fire kind of does sort of do its thing, and with Scion gone, balances really need to like worry a lot more, because Fire's main thing is just throwing combos, and they used to not be able to do that because if they tried, they would just get hit for 5,000 damage the second they got above 10 pips. So since that is no longer a thing, I would say that the Fire does have the advantage in this matchup. Of course, things like Raging Bull Detonate are going to do mass just as as they do. So I have Fire beating Balance here. Balance versus Ice is an interesting one. I had this at lean Balance, but I will say that the Chameleon change and the Scion change didn't really affect this matchup all that much, but I think that it, I don't know, because like the way balances can sort of play, I don't think it's moved. I think we're going to leave this as a lean balance matchup. Balance is slightly favored, but it's like Ice does have good control over the Aura War. It's just the Balance School can do Balance School things. If a Balance goes for a Brace and an Ice goes for a Thieving Dragon, they can obviously just Scorpion that, and steal a 50 shield, and Balance can also just hit around debuffs, just as you do, and that, I think, really gives Balance a leg up here. It's like, Ice is a very, very strong tank, and most of it, I will say, is on the Balance just not taking open Winter Moons. That's the hard part, from the looks of things, for some people. But if the Balance plays to perfection, which we are assuming that does happen in these, then the Balance is going to pull out ahead, I feel like. So You know, it's like there's a slight health difference, slight resist difference, but balance definitely does make up for it in stats. You know, they have 10 more pierce than ice does, so it's like balance. I think balance's resist cap is 75, maybe 76. Whereas ice's resist cap, in this update at least, is 85. So it's more so an even trade-off there, but balance just sort of making better use of their pierce can sort of deal with things like unbraced hits better is what I'm trying to get at. So there's that. It's like this matchup is a finicky one, but I do think balance still remains in the lead. Balance versus life. This is an interesting one. I have this at very safe for the balance. I would say that I'm going to leave it there. I think this is going to be our first entry into the safe tier. Balance just absolutely demolishes life. It's like if a life tries to go for things like goat monks, then balance obviously has Gearhead Destroyer to steal them, and that just slows down the match and does damage and whatnot. And if life decides to go for a Giga Heal, balance has plenty of answers to that. They can either, you know, run their standard heal counters like Triton and all that, or they can run Rainbow Serpent. Usually balances will run both, and Rainbow Serpent will just sort of immobilize the life. It's like, it is, if you heal too much against a balance, then you'll just get loaded up with a bunch of 60 weaknesses, and you'll keep the heals if they use Rainbow Serpent, but it's not going to get you nearly as far. So balance definitely has a commanding lead in this matchup, but the life can still win if you're not careful. So balance versus myth is the last one that involves the school, and with Chameleon and Scion being banned, I think we finally have an entry into the safe tier, with balance taking a loss. So I thought the day would never come, but it has. Myth beats balance safely. Myth's whole thing is just getting around damage mitigation, and that's kind of balance's whole thing. And now that Chameleon is gone, Myth can participate in the Aura War. I will say that. It's like that's an advantage that balance had before, because they can just click brace, and that's not something that a Myth can really deal with. So now, of course, it's much easier for the Myth to keep a handle on the Aura War and just attenuate away the braces just as they go. So that's why I have Myth winning this by more now. The main thing about it in this matchup is just don't spam blades, because that's how the balance wins. A lot of them are packing Raws, and you know, if you get 5 blades on you, they're using like negative pip Raws. So avoid that if you're in this matchup and you're a Myth. Next up, balance versus storm. On the last one, I had it at safe for the balance. I don't know about that anymore. I think we'll bump it down to likely. I think that, you know, catch of the day really, the main thing here, the balance losing Scion affected a lot of these matchups. Not so much ice, of course, but it affected Myth, it affected fire, and it affected storm pretty significantly. So now that Storm can actually build an offense against the balance school, they have a much better shot at victory. So balance does still win this, in my opinion, but the margin has shrunk, and honestly, balance has been taking hit after hit this update. Their best matchup at this point is life, and that's always a slog. You're always going to be sitting there for like 45 minutes to an hour. So there's that. Death versus Myth is the next matchup, and this one has seen some very interesting developments ever since Poison was added. I didn't really have necessarily the best, I guess, picture with how like Poison was going to play into this, because as you go along, Death's resist cap is 78. Let's just be real. That's very high. And Myth's setups are using less and less pierce as the days go by. So Death has a pretty sizable resist surplus. compared to Myth, and Death obviously just wins the Aura War in every capacity. I mean, Monster Mash is not going to be as great, but it is going to do damage, so it's like, even if you brace as a Myth, you're still taking about 800 damage, and it does give a stone, the opportunity for a stone, but there's that. The other thing is that counter bait, especially on the Death School, has risen up a ton, and by counter bait, I mean, you know, like a Death will just get life pips up, for example, against a Myth, and then a Death will Monster Mash a Myth's brace. From there, the Myth will obviously Stone Colossus, because what the hell else are you going to do with a 70% weakness on you? So the Myth will Stone, and the Death will Twaret for the same amount of pips, and the Death will get, you know, the usual 1320, 1360, depending on how high they have it upgraded, but another 440 by clearing that dot. So they just heal for a ton. It's like they're healing for, what is it, 1800 if they have max tier Twaret. So I mean, that's a pretty boring way to play, but it definitely does influence this this matchup as well as a couple others. So I do think that plus Death just having sort of an auto win in the Aura War is going to really shrink this down. I do think Myth is still favored, just because Death can't really do much of anything else outside of play counter bait and sit under brace, but I do think that Myth has an advantage because of that. It's like Myth can just out-damage the Death. Obviously, again, this is another matchup where you're not going to want to blade too much, because Death just sort of feeds on that. It's like even single blades are risky sometimes, but you can win a punch-out against a Death if you are a Myth, just because Death's... so many of Death's spells have weaknesses attached to them, so that's part of why Myth is still in the advantage here. So, there you go. Death versus Storm. This one remains in the non-contestable tier. The Death would have to deck fail aggressively to lose this. And, I mean, if we're talking about playing optimally, the Death is not going to lose, just because Death has the best stats and Storm has the worst right now. Storm has, like, no resist. Like, Storm's resist cap is 56, and I'm going to give you 3 guesses as to what Death's pierce cap is. So, with that in mind, Death also only has like 5% less damage than Storm, which is already ridiculous. And just Death's library counters Storm to hell and back. It's like it's a weakness school, and it'll also counter blades, so catch is generally ill-advised. And it also counters auras. It's like this used to be very, very safe Death, but not in the non-contestable tier back before Poison was added, because at least as a Storm you could put up a negative aura, like an Attenuate or something, and you get like a Shriked Oni off, and that would get you there. But since Poison is a thing now, you can't really aura over their braces, so that just sort of suffocates the Storm even more, and that's part of the problem here with this matchup. It is just not contestable if you are a Storm, which is kind of unfortunate, but crazy times we live in. Death versus Fire is the next one up, and I had this as lean Death in the last one, but Poison has had such an impact on how Death plays the game that I think I can safely move it down here. This matchup has seen a lot of fluctuation over the years. I mean, like, Death originally had a significant advantage because they could just spam 60 weaknesses with Vampire and Threefolds and all that, and then as weakness counters became more accessible, things like Purge got added. Naturally, Fire came back. Once the dot meta came around and you could just Ifrit through minus 60s, Fire obviously took safe victories here. But now that Poison is in the game, it is very, very hard for a Fire to beat a Death. Fire is another squishy school. It doesn't have a lot of health, doesn't have a lot of survivability. It has a much better chance than Storm against Death, but it's like if a Death just puts a negative aura on you, it's like, what are you going to do at that point? You could Furnace and get Monster Mash, and now you have a 70 weakness to deal with, and at that point you're not a Myth. You can't just throw out a card to get rid of that. And it's like if they brace, you know, Fire does have good pierce, but if a Death braces, you really can't do anything about that either, because if you do, they will click the Poison card, deal 1,000 damage to you, and just like put up a 45% incoming damage aura. And it's all the worse if you already have an aura up. Poison, in my opinion, is one of the most broken tempo swing cards the meta has ever seen. It was originally teased as, you know, clear an aura for, I think it was 240 blades or something like that, which was strong, but, you know, the community revolted at that idea, and now instead they changed it to a neg aura to neg aura type counter, which we didn't understand it at the time, but that genuinely broke the card incredibly, because it's just such a tempo swing. If they have it and you put a neg aura on them, it really just discourages the use of neg auras against the death even more, because it's like, I know that's how it's supposed to work, but for so cheap, doing so much damage and swinging the tempo of the match that much, especially coupled with Monster Mash, because it's like, you're already getting so much done with the poison, and so logically, as, you know, the fire in this case, you would want to furnace over that, and then they just Monster Mash you for another 1200 damage, and now you're down 2200 health, probably more than 1200 to be honest. It's more like 1800 if you're a fire. So now you're down 2800 health just for clicking auras. Incredible. I love the death school. I love that it's balanced. Amazing. So that's why death versus fire ends up as safe death. It has come back around here after more than a year, I think. So yeah, I mean, the matchup has really gone all the way across the board. It has gone from here up to fire winning it safely, back down to death having a safe matchup here. Alright, let me quit rambling, because we are almost 17 minutes into the video. So fire versus life is the next one up, and I had this as lean life, just because, I mean, fire can't really do much of anything, but ever since Seraph sort of took center stage in the Life School's deck, this matchup has just gotten so much worse for the fire, because at this point the life can match your damage, by the way, as a fire. It's like if you throw out like a Helephant or something, the life can just Legend Golem into Seraph for the exact same damage, because the school is balanced. Amazing, incredible. So that, I mean, because before, the reason why, and I've had fire winning this matchup as recently as earlier this year, and the reason for that was because the fire could just do its damage, hold on to its counters, and win like that by just countering heals as they happened. But now life's not even healing to heal. They're healing to do 2500 to you with one card. And all things considered, it's probably doing north of 3k with both the cards combined. So it's like, fire can't really come back from that. Life absolutely can. And so it's just a losing matchup for fire at that point. So it has swung dramatically away from the fire. Fire versus myth is another one. And for this one, it's like, this is very PvE oriented for the myth, and I don't think I'm going to say that it's moved. I think that this matchup still leans in favor of the myth, even when it shouldn't. But I mean, the myth school, it just has its ways against fire, because fire is a squishy school, myth is less squishy. It does have pretty solid resist, but it's like, if you blade a bunch and then just send your hit, whatever it ends up being, whether it's a Toth or a Jin or whatever, even if it doesn't kill, if you're sitting on like life pips the whole game, for example, which is what myths should do in this matchup, if the fire tries to dot you, then you just click Spinosaur and set up an Oni immediately. So it's like, myth just sort of has the tools to win this matchup. But it can fall apart, which is why it's not more favorable for myth. A fire could always, you know, Frost Giant, Scarecrow, that sort of deal. You know, the myth could deck fail, that kind of thing. So I do think that myth is favored, but it is still one that you've got to be on your toes in. So with that being said, fire versus storm is next, and this one I used to have as like 4th worst matchup in the game. I don't know if it stays there necessarily, but storm is very favored against fire. Fire just has been making a lot of ground in this matchup. I might even move it down here. It's like, that's kind of unheard of. But With this matchup, Storm should win. I mean, Catch Owl will do the Fire's entire health bar, but if the Fire sort of PvEs back, like, it used to be Fires would use traps and all that, but now it's all about, you know, Blade, TC Blade, Inferno Blade, Furnace. At that point, it's like you got 4 buffs. You can send like a King Art or something like that, and it's more of like a race to the bottom. You can defend yourself, and they can't. is mostly what it boils down to. It's just you've got to really do that before the Storm can find a strike. Oftentimes they can, and you just die. But at least you have a better chance now than you did before, just because of how Fire's playstyle has shifted. Ice versus Death. This is one that I had tilting in favor of the Ice back in the last tier list, but due to the rise of counterbait, I am going to be putting this as lean Death. So this one flips toward the Death School. It finally happened. You know, I've been saying, you know, it's gonna happen eventually, but now it has. So usually against a Death, you can perform pretty well. I mean, you do counter them. Woolly Mammoth kind of just dogs on them, and things like Winter Moon still do damage and whatnot. It's just the main thing is counterbait is horrific to deal with as an Ice, because you could put 3-folds on, but then you risk getting Evil Snowman and Purged and whatnot. Like, there have been times where I've seen that a Death is going to play counterbait, and I've put a 3-fold on them just for them to purge it off. So it's like incredible. But Ice still has tools for this matchup. You know, we still have our resist, we still have our braces, and this is sort of like Death is better at Aura Wars than Ice is, especially because, you know, if a Death neg-auras us, we can shoo, but they can just immolate back for, you know, 2,000 value for 4 pips and get rid of all of my traps. Whereas with them, you know, we negative aura them, and like I said, they poison and take away a brace, put on a 45 aura, and we can shoot back, but then they immolate, and yeah, the interaction just breaks, and it is no fun. But you can eke it out as an Ice. It's like you've just got to play well and play around the counterbait as best as you can. But it's becoming more and more abysmal by the day. I'm gonna be real. I'm surprised I'm not even putting it in the likely category for the Death. But yep, poison card gets added, shift in play style, the matchup flips. That's kind of where we're at. Next on the list is Ice versus Fire, and in the last one I put it at not contestable. And I think that's where it's gonna stay. I think that it is not as bad as Death versus Storm, but if you get a Fire and you're an Ice, you're kind of boned, because if they neg-aura you, what are you going to do? It's like you better have all of your braces on deck, because God knows they're going to have 8 Attenuates and Starfalls just ready to go. And that's a big problem that the Ice School faces in this matchup. And the biggest one yet is counter the counters, because Ice can't Ice Wyvern to clear blades, because, you know, you'll get Fire Dragoned and you got a million dots on you. And then you can't counter dots because, you know, Ice is forced to weave Fire because Fire has Glacial Shield, so you can't weave Storm, which would work infinitely better if Glacial Shield wasn't a thing. And I'm going off on a tangent, but I've said that a million times. You can't weave Storm as an Ice, because Glacial Shield just sort of locks you out of damage in both for one turn. So naturally, Ice has to use life spells to counter the dots, and those are usually dots to hots with Twaret and King Art, and that never ends well, because Fire runs Storm Duel, and that will just like allow them to use a King Art, which they then surge out of into a Rain of Fire, all under the same furnace. So incredible. You can't really do much as the Ice in this matchup, is what I'm really getting at, because it's like the meta right now is Fire weaving Storm and Ice weaving Life. So it's just you get shafted either way. That's what it boils down to. But yeah, not contestable. And I actually think that it might shift in favor of the Ice after Darkmoor drops, solely because Ice may start packing Camp Bandit. I could also be very wrong. I could be incredibly wrong, because Ice Healing is about to get buffed to High Heaven, and Toilet might be even better. I am glad that I'm not playing this next meta, because counterbait is going to be everywhere, and I'm going to hate it here. Anyway, that will wrap up Fire versus Ice. And we immediately go into Life versus Ice, which is still not contestable. If the Life is playing optimally, they are going to have main deck purges. So, you know, I packed 9 3-folds on my Ice. I packed 4 main deck, the max of course, and 5 side deck. And I will still see Life Wizards heal through them to use Seraphs with, and purge the rest. So, this is kind of where we're at. It's no fun to play against. That's what I'm gonna say about it. So, Life versus Ice, definitely very, very bad matchup, and it's probably going to remain the worst in the game for quite some time. Next on the list is Ice versus Myth, and in this one, I mean, I see Myths playing counterbait too now. So, with that being said, this does flip the matchup back toward the Myth. I don't think it's by as much as the Death matchup is flipped, but Myth definitely is in the advantage against Ice again. They're not as good at handling auras, but it's like Myth can sort of put up pressure in a number of ways. And obviously, as a Myth, you're not going to want to blade too much, but if you're like a Myth, Weaving Fire, running Toilet, or Spinosaur even, like, you can just set up an Oni out of a counter and whatnot. It's just, I mean, counterbait is rampant, and Myth benefits from it pretty much, especially against Ice. They uses fire counters to clear shields, because you can't just leave shields on a Myth, otherwise they'll gin you eventually. So that is why I think this matchup has flipped toward the Myth. So next on the list is Ice versus Storm, and this one, on the last one, I put as Lean Ice, but some fortunate news for the Ice School. I think that has shifted toward us a little bit. It's definitely not a great matchup, but if the Ice could pull blade counters and keep a 3-fold on at all times, that's the big kicker. It's like, that can be very hard, just because, you know, Storms are going to be carrying a million purges and whatnot, just to deal with that. But if you can keep a 3-fold on them so they can't bury, then you should be okay. And I think that counts for a lot. It's not moving too much, because obviously people still bury through the 3-fold, not even to heal, but to use the Storm Owl to get them a million pips back, and just kind of double owl is something that I see Storms do a lot in this matchup, and it really works. So yeah, it's just a matter of being careful. You can't really shield too much, because Storms run fire stuff to just clear the shields. So, yep, with that in mind, Ice has seen a glimmer of hope here in a matchup. Life versus Death is up next, and on the last one, I had Death beating it by a likely margin, but again, Seraph is a card, we're putting it as likely Life. This matchup seems to flip every single time that I make one of these, but it is definitely in the Life's camp at this point. This just overwhelmingly, I mean, I wouldn't say it has overwhelmingly, but it definitely favors the Life, just because, like, as a Death, you've got to just sort of burn your counters on things like Goat Monks, because otherwise then you just take a bunch of damage. But if you don't want to do that, and you want to shield from the Seraph, what they do is they just Oni's Forge, take off another 3-fold, and now they have even more Seraph leverage. So yeah, it is no fun going against the Life School these days, just because Seraph is exceedingly overtuned, and even the Death School has fallen victim to it. So Life versus Myth is the next one up, and this one is very, very hard. I put it in the safe category last time, and I think it is going to stay there, because this, I mean, Myth can't really do much. It used to be Myths would just spam blades and eventually go for like a Jin or a Toth to seal the kill. But that's not really going on anymore because, like I said, Lifes are running Oni's Forge to heal with, and Myths generally don't run heal counters. That's the main reason why. That's the main reason why Life is sort of rolling it. But yeah, I mean, Myth gets rolled pretty hard by Life, just because, I mean, Scarecrow does actually take apart the blade strat. You can spam as many blades as you like, but the moment they put those 35 weeks on you, it's kind of over, because you lose so many blades like that, and you lose tempo, and you've probably pulled for a lot of tri-blades from side, and gotten them, and gotten rid of extras, and then you're just sort of out of gas in the tank. So Life rolls Myth these days. Storm versus Life is in an interesting spot. I put it as safe last time, but I think I'm going to move it down to likely, just because, I mean, Life with Deathweave is just nuts, and can absolutely just roll the Storm School on occasion. Otherwise, it is very easy for the Storm to win this matchup, just because if a Life does go for a heal, like even if it's a little heal like a Goat Monk, a Storm can hit back with a Triton, do like 1700 damage, and have a 60 blade. That's not a position that a Life Wizard will ever want to be in, and the Storm Wizard can really capitalize well. It's just, I mean, y'all saw, I think, last Friday's video it was, where I was able to get some pretty good Tritons off and all that, and win like that, just sort of getting blades and just sort of blitzing the people. It's like, that's how Storm does it, and Storm has an easier time doing it against Life, just as long as they don't get countered, and Life running death counters, very punishing. It's like, just the presence of death counters in any matchup is going to shift the matchup away from the Storm, just because of how oppressive this is. So, I mean, that's where we're at. And the last one, of course, is going to be Storm versus Myth. This one I had as likely Storm in the last one, and I think that is where it's going to stay. Yeah, I think that's a good place to put it. So, yeah, I mean, Storm is still favored. You know, Myth can't really set up Jhin all that well, and it's always just a race to the bottom, race to the kill with this. And Storm is generally better at doing that, and, you know, Storm, it's mostly about who pulls Shrike first, I've noticed, but if the Storm does pull Shrike first, then they can win. So, there you go. It's like Storm usually does, and they need fewer buffs to kill, so that really helps them as well. So, now it's time, as is the custom, to go over what I think have been the best and worst schools, and everything in between, of this last meta before the Darkmoor update, and the level 180 level cap raise. So, you see a lot of shifts toward death. You see that the Myth matchup went from very, you know, safe for the Myth, like, literally, this is like the 6th worst matchup in the game on the last list. Now it is like the 4th most contestable, and yeah, I mean, Death really gained a lot in that matchup just because of how they play. Significant gains in the balance matchup as well. The Life matchup did unfortunately flip, but the Life school was busted anyway. Big gains in the Fire matchup here as well. Yeah, huge gains actually, and the Storm matchup obviously going to stay stagnant, but yeah, I mean, Death could just sort of stamp it out at any rate. But even though Death lost one matchup to a flip, they did flip another with the Ice matchup. There aren't really as many Ices in queue, but I feel like we're about to see a lot of them, so who knows, maybe the Death can get ahead of that. But, I mean, ultimately, healing is going to be king, so if I do make another tier list, we're probably going to see a lot of Lifes in the non-contestable tiers, so there you have it. I do think that Death is the best school, definitively, at max level right now, just because of how much auras matter and how much control Death has over them, and the tempo swings that can happen with things like poison, and it's already insane stats. Just the stats it has, coupled with the fact that you can't counter their braces, make for a diabolical combo, and I think that is going to be what really holds Death into that #1 spot. Okay, we're back. Second place, I think I can confidently still give to Balance. It is winning, 1, 2, 3, 4 matchups here. Did lose some ground in the Death and Storm matchups, but I mean, actually it lost a lot of ground. But even though Balance lost Scion, of course, with the rework, and Chameleon Clash is definitely not as viable anymore, it is still the #2 school because those two cards, while they were strong, they don't nerf Balance nearly enough. Scales of Destiny is still running rampant. Loremaster and Samurai both still do tons of damage, and Balance is another permabrace school with good stats, so hard for me to really argue that Balance is worse than #2, but right up behind it is the Life School. It flipped its hard counter matchup, and it shored up its 3 best matchups. Like, it shored up its 2 counter matchups where it's the counter school, and of course its neutral matchup has never been favorable to Ice. But yeah, very, very massive gains outside of the Balance matchup for the Life School, just because of how it plays, and that really can be attributed to Seraph getting its huge buff, because I mean, for that low of a pip cost and doing as much as it does, it really does do a lot, because Life just sort of has so much flexibility and it's got so much control over the match. Life is in a very good position right now, and I expect it to go up after the update drops. So Life, I think I will give to 3rd place for this one, but after that I don't know where else to go. Myth does win a lot of these swingy matchups, but I don't know if I'd say that they're worthy of #4. Fire lost a lot of ground, but they're still very, very strong. The thing is with this, I can make this like objectively, and then I can also make it based on who's in queue, and deaths are flooding queue, so I think that alone is going to really put Storm down at the bottom. But in terms of who's going to get #4, I don't know. I mean, it might sound crazy. It might sound very crazy, but Myth can contend in every single matchup except the Life matchup. I think I'm going to give Myth #4. It's a little outlandish, I will say, but Myth definitely, like, there is a very steep drop off after Life at #3, but Myth being #4 makes sense to me. So yeah, I mean, a Myth just sort of being able to win all of these except Life, pretty good showing for them, I would say. So there you have that. 5th place, I think would be fair to put Fire, just because of the pressure that they can put up. And for 6th, based on matchups, we're going to go with Storm for 6th place, and then 7th is Ice, just as per usual, because we don't win any matchups outside of Storm anymore. Incredible. But yeah, okay, so 1 Death, 2 Balance, 3 Life, 4 Myth, 5 Fire, 6 Storm, 7 Ice. That is the ranking that I can see, but if we are accounting for queue population, Storm goes right to the bottom, just because of how many Death Wizards there are, and I think Ice and Fire also trade places as a result of that. So yeah, I mean, Deaths just very, very strong right now, and Ice is better suited for dealing with them, so I think they come up to 5th place based on who's in queue, and Fire and Storm drop again. It's crazy, but we really have circled back to the pre-Wallaru hierarchy, if you can believe it. So very interesting, but I think that is going to wrap this one up. So crazy to come full circle like this. I mean, this was more or less the list 2 years ago when I got back into PvP for the first time. But yeah, that's going to wrap up, so thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more, and I will see y'all later.